Night had swallowed the valley whole. The wind howled across the plains like a wounded beast, dragging dust and thunder behind it. The sky had turned the color of old bruises. Purple, black, heavy with rage. Eli Boone leaned low over his horse's neck, urging the tired animal through mud that sucked at its hooves like the earth wanted to hold them back. Lightning split the world wide open, showing him the river below, swollen, wild, devouring trees, swallowing fence lines, dragging everything downstream like memories no one wanted. He pulled on the reins, breath ragged. The bridge ahead, the only crossing for miles, lay broken in half, torn from its banks by the flood. The middle beams hung twisted in the current like the ribs of a dead beast. He stared at it. Going around would take days. Going through might take his life. But he'd already buried too much behind him to turn back now. Then he heard it. Not the river, not the wind, but something else. A voice. Faint, low, carried by the current. A cry that didn't belong to any animal. Eli froze. The sound came again, clearer. A deep, broken gasp somewhere midstream. He stepped closer to the bank, hand shading his eyes against lightning. And then he saw her. A massive shape caught between two jagged logs, half submerged in the roaring flood. Her hair spread out like dark riverweed, her hand gripping a bundle wrapped in hide. She fought the current with impossible strength, but she was losing. A woman. No, a giant. Her shoulders broad as a wagon's yoke. Her skin bronzed and marked with war paint that washed away in streaks of blood and rain. He didn't think. He moved. His coat hit the mud. His hat flew off in the wind, and before reason could stop him, he plunged into the water. The cold hit him like a hammer. The river dragged him sideways, spun him under, threw him against debris. He clawed for breath, eyes burning, lungs searing. Lightning struck again, the flash showed her face. Eyes half closed, breath shallow, fingers clutching that bundle like her life depended on it. He reached her, every muscle screaming. He caught her arm. It felt like grabbing hold of a fallen tree. "Hold on," he shouted, though the river swallowed his words whole. She looked at him through the storm, eyes dark as the river itself, a mix of fury and pleading. The log beneath her shifted. The current surged. The world turned white with foam and thunder. Eli drove his boots into the mud and pulled with everything he had left. The current ripped at his arms, tore skin from his hands. But he didn't let go. Not this time. When they crashed onto the bank, the world went still for one breath. Rain hammered down. Thunder rolled away like retreating drums. Eli lay there, chest heaving, mud in his mouth, water in his lungs. Beside him, the giant woman stirred. Her hand still clutched the hide-wrapped bundle to her chest. He turned his head, voice a whisper through the storm. "You're alive? Thank God, you're alive." Her eyes closed. Her body went limp. The bundle slipped from her grasp. Eli caught it before it touched the ground. Heavy, wrapped tight, sacred, maybe. He looked at her face. Strong, fierce, yet strangely peaceful, and for a moment forgot everything except the sound of her breathing and the storm dying around them. He didn't know who she was, didn't know what he'd just dragged from the river, but he knew one thing: the world had changed the moment he pulled her from that water, and it would never go back. The rain eased into a steady whisper, thin and cold against the plains. Eli knelt beside the motionless figure, hands shaking. He pressed 2 fingers to her neck, pulse slow but strong. He let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. The bundle she'd carried was wrapped in animal hide, sealed with a cord of woven horsehair. He didn't open it. Whatever it was, it mattered more to her than her own breath. He dragged her further from the river, his boots sliding, muscles burning. Her weight was inhuman, but so was his stubbornness. He found a fallen branch, lashed it between the saddle and a dragging loop of rope, made a crude sledge. "Hold on, big lady," he whispered. "You didn't fight that river just to die on my watch." The horse strained as he led it forward, the sledge scraping over rocks and roots. The wind hissed through the grass, carrying the distant sound of wolves. Eli fired once into the dark, not to hit, just to warn. The echo rolled far across the valley. The wolves faded. Hour by hour they moved. By the time he reached his land, dawn was climbing over the ridge. He dragged the sledge inside the barn, spread a horse blanket beneath her, and started a fire. The light flickered across her face. High cheekbones, lips cracked from the cold, a faint scar running along her jaw. He poured water from a tin cup and trickled some onto her lips. "Come on now," he whispered. "Stay with me." Eli sat back against a post, soaked to the bone. His mind was a storm of its own. He remembered the raid years ago, the one that burned his family out of their home. The markings this woman carried. The same patterns carved into her beads. Fate, he thought bitterly, has a cruel sense of humor. He could have left her in the river. Could have ridden away and let the current take her. But he hadn't. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe mercy. Maybe both. Outside, the storm had moved east, leaving only a silver drizzle and the smell of wet cedar. The giant woman stirred once, murmuring words in a tongue he didn't know. Deep, rhythmic, almost like prayer. "Rest," he whispered. "You're safe now." But he didn't know that. Not really. He only knew the storm outside had passed, but the one he just carried into his barn had only begun to rise. By sunrise, the river had settled into silence. The rancher sat by the dying coals, hat low, eyes lost in the smoke. Two giant sisters appeared at the edge of his yard, dressed in hides stitched with turquoise threads, their shadows stretching half across the ground. They said nothing at first, only bowed their heads slightly, warriors giving honor to a man who had earned it. The older one placed a folded cloth in his hands, a token woven with Apache symbols of life and water. Then, quietly, they vanished into the morning haze. But something lingered. That rescue had not gone unnoticed. Somewhere out in the mesas, a message was traveling fast, carried by riders bound for the chief himself. By evening, the world tightened. Coyotes didn't howl. Even the wind stayed away, as if the land itself was holding its breath. He stepped outside to find hundreds of hoof marks pressed into the dust, circling his land like a warning. He loaded his rifle, stoked his lantern, and sat by the window through the long desert night, waiting for dawn, for riders, for whatever fate was sending his way. The next morning broke like the edge of a blade, sharp, cold, silent. Dust rose on distant ridges. The rancher looked toward the horizon where the sun burned through a curtain of dust. And there they were, a line of Apache horsemen cresting the ridge, spears glinting like lightning. At their center rode a figure draped in black and crimson, the chief himself, proud and towering, his face painted with the mark of command. The rancher didn't run. He stood with shoulders squared, facing the truth he'd been expecting all along. When the first rider dismounted, he laid down no weapon, only a spear wrapped in white cloth, a sign of parley. The chief's voice rose across the stillness. "The man who saved my daughters, stepped forward." And the rancher did. The chief dismounted, eyes locked with the weight of a man who'd seen too much war. "You pulled them from death," he said, English rough but strong. "In our law, that makes you brother to my blood." The rancher nodded, humble but wary. Didn't do it for a reward, just couldn't let them die. The chief studied him a long moment, then smiled. A rare thing, like sunlight breaking through stone. "No reward, only a bond. You've tied your fate to ours, and that bond cannot be undone." He turned to leave, then spoke once more. "Tomorrow you will ride with me. There is a place where only blood brothers are welcome." As the riders vanished into the hills, the rancher stood alone, knowing that his quiet life had just crossed into legend. Dawn came with a whisper of wind and a sky painted in gold. The rancher rode toward the canyon where the world dropped away into a sea of red stone and silence. There, waiting beside a circle of riders, stood the chief. The two giant sisters stood like statues carved from the desert itself. They rode for hours beneath the burning sun into the heart of the sacred lands. At last, the trail opened into a vast hollow between two towering mesas. Before them stood a stone arch carved with symbols that shimmered faintly under the light. Beneath it, a pool of water lay still as glass, clear, deep, untouched by dust. The chief drew a knife, its blade engraved with ancient signs, and pricked his palm. Then he handed it to the rancher. "Blood makes family," he said, "and family makes fate." Without hesitation, the rancher did the same, their blood mixing as it fell into the sacred pool. The water shimmered, then stilled, as if the earth itself had accepted the bond. "From this day your fight is ours," the chief said. "Your enemies will be met by 400 riders who call you brother." And in that moment the rancher realized he hadn't just crossed a river that night. He had crossed into destiny. Night fell over the plains like a velvet curtain, thick with stars. Eli rode alongside Nalaya, the giant princess, their horses kicking up dust that shimmered silver in the moonlight. She unwrapped the bundle she had carried through the storm. Not gold, not jewels, something fragile, wrapped in cloth marked with symbols Eli didn't understand. She held it close, fingers brushing the fabric as if it were as precious as life itself. Finally she spoke, her voice low, carrying sorrow and memory. My father once sought peace. He offered our lands, our trust, to the white men, and they betrayed it. Hundreds died. Eli listened, the firelight catching the planes of her massive face. His own chest tightened. He had known betrayal, carried it in the hollow of his heart. And now it had taken shape before him. A giant, wounded princess whose hands held the last hope of her people. She looked at him, eyes not accusing, not demanding, only asking him to understand. This, she said, lifting the bundle, is what they tried to take, not for gold but for power. If it falls into the wrong hands, the world will burn further than it already has. Eli reached out, laying a hand over hers. Then we make sure it survives. No one will take it from you. Nalaya's eyes softened, a fragile trust glimmering across the shadows. She nodded once, her burden slightly eased. Above them, stars wheeled silently. And beneath that endless night, Eli felt a resolve he hadn't known since before the river. He would see this through, whatever the cost. The canyon morning was painted in blood-red light. Dust hung thick, clinging to the horse's flanks and sweat-streaked skin. Eli rode close to Nalaya, eyes scanning the horizon where shadows of distant riders stretched long and thin against the dawn. Then the dust rose faster, curling like a living thing. Shapes emerged, silhouettes of men on horseback, glinting steel and cold intent. Eli's chest tightened. He knew the man among them before his eyes could confirm. Calder Voss, a bounty hunter from the past, a man who bore grudges like weapons. The first shots rang out, sharp and deadly against the canyon walls. Horses whinnied, hoofs scrambled over rock. An echo of gunfire bounced like thunder. Eli ducked behind a boulder, returning fire with calm precision. Nalaya surged forward like a force of nature, scattering Voss's men like leaves before a gale. She struck without hesitation, her strength shattering bones, sending men tumbling into the dust. But Voss was relentless. He knew Eli's moves, his rhythm, and pushed forward with merciless cunning. Eli's horse screamed as a bullet tore through its flank, throwing him to the ground. Pain flared, he scrambled up, dragging his rifle, heart hammering. Nalaya turned, fury blazing in her eyes. She roared, a sound that carried through the canyon like a tempest, and charged again, scattering the remaining men with sheer force. The canyon fell into brief, trembling silence. Smoke rose from small fires, mingling with dust and the scent of iron. Eli helped Nalaya to her feet, leaning against her strength as much as she relied on his. The document must reach my father, she said, voice strained but unwavering. Eli gritted his teeth. Then we keep moving. No one gets it. No one gets you. The road ahead stretched into jagged cliffs and endless desert. Every step demanding courage they were barely sure they still possessed. Yet through the chaos, a bond had been forged, tempered in blood and unrelenting storm. Twilight settled over the valley as Eli rode beside Nalaya toward the Okita camp. Smoke curled from fires dotting the plain. But as they approached, warmth was replaced by tension. Sharp, biting, rising from the ground itself. Warriors emerged from tents, spears and bows at the ready. Children peered from behind their mothers. And there was Chief Okitan, seated atop a raised platform, eyes fixed on the horizon. Nalaya leaned close. They will not welcome you easily. My father's fury is fierce. Eli dismounted, boots sinking into the soft earth, eyes lifted to meet the chief's. No fear, only quiet resolve. The chief rose, his voice cutting through the still evening like a blade. Eli Boone, you enter our camp as one who has brought both salvation and danger. Speak now. Why should your life remain with us? The camp fell silent. Eli's chest rose and fell. He did not flinch. I did what I had to, he said, because her life mattered. Not for reward, not for favor. Only because it was right. Nalaya stepped forward, her massive frame towering. Father, he saved me. Not for coin, not for glory. He risked everything. And if we are to survive, we will need him by our side. The chief's eyes softened, just slightly. Sacrifice is the measure of men, he said. You have offered proof. But the measure of your heart will be tested still. Thunder rolled across the plains as the U.S. Army's advance became undeniable. Dust rising on the horizon. The distant glint of rifles, cavalry moving with relentless purpose. Eli rode beside Naliah, the tribe moving cautiously behind them. The chief's words echoed, "If you wish to carry our trust, you must stand as a shield." Eli didn't hesitate. "I'll lead them away. Buy the tribe time to flee. That's the only way they survive." Naliah's eyes widened. "You'll draw them straight into danger." "I know, but you must get the treaty to your father." The chief approached, his expression unreadable. "Then go. Courage is not the absence of fear, but the choice to act despite it. Make your stand, Eli Boone, and let the plains remember your name." Eli spurred his horse forward, charging toward the oncoming soldiers. The storm rose with him, wind tearing across the plain, lightning splitting the clouds. Every shot, every maneuver, drew the army further from the hidden paths where the Okita moved unseen. Naliah moved like a storm incarnate, massive, unstoppable, shielding Eli when volleys struck too close, scattering soldiers with sheer strength. Hour by hour, the battle raged. The storm, the gunfire, the screams merged into a relentless symphony of survival. By midnight, the soldiers were exhausted, their formations broken. Eli leaned against his horse, soaked to the bone, mud and blood streaking his face, but standing firm. From the ridge above, the chief watched, silent but proud. He saw the sacrifice, the courage, the sheer human will bending the storm to their advantage. And in that moment, Eli had become more than a man. He had become a shield, a living promise that courage could hold against the tide of destruction. The first light of dawn crept over the blackened earth, pale gold spilling across the scars of battle. Smoke drifted from smoldering fires, carrying the scent of gunpowder and burned sage. Eli lay sprawled on the ground, every joint aching, clothes soaked with rain and blood. He had survived, but only just. Beside him, Naliah stirred, her strength unbroken even as her body bore the cost of survival. Chief O'Keaton emerged, presence commanding even in the morning light. He walked to Eli, the crunch of boots over scorched earth punctuating the stillness. "Eli Boone," he said, voice solemn, "you have faced what few would dare. You have given more than many could bear. The tribe owes you life, honor, and recognition." Eli pushed himself up on one elbow, meeting the chief's gaze. Around them, the tribe moved silently, eyes filled with respect, awe, and the quiet acknowledgement of a hero forged in fire, rain, and blood. For the first time in days, Eli allowed himself a breath not driven by fear or necessity, but by a fragile, burgeoning sense of redemption. He had survived the storm, and in doing so had found something he thought long lost. A place, a purpose, and a promise that his life could still mean something. The river shimmered like liquid gold in the first light of dawn. Eli stood at its edge, the water reflecting the sky's soft amber hues, feeling the weight of everything that had passed settle into quiet stillness. Chief O'Keaton approached, cloak catching the early light, eyes steady and unwavering. "You have done more than survive, Eli Boone," he said. "You have saved my daughter, protected my people, and proven that courage can bridge worlds. And now the choice is yours." Eli straightened, eyes drifting to the horizon. "What choice?" "You may stay here, among my people, to lead, to guide, to unite. A place where the lives you saved can shape the future, where your name will stand not only for courage, but for peace." Naliah emerged from the barn, silhouetted against the rising sun, her hand brushing against Eli's arm in silent support. Their bond, unspoken, unbreakable, full of possibility, said everything words could not. Eli drew a slow breath. He looked at the plains, the river, the tribe waiting in reverent silence. He thought of rivers crossed, storms survived, armies faced. He thought of all the ghosts he'd carried alone. "I will stay," he said, voice steady, carrying across the still morning. "Not for reward, not for title, but because it is right, because the future is worth more than the past I carried alone." The chief's expression softened, a rare smile breaking across his stern features. He extended his hand, an unspoken offer of trust and acceptance. Eli took it, standing tall, his body weary but his spirit unbroken. One by one, the warriors stepped forward, silent respect in their eyes, recognizing Eli not as a stranger, not as an outsider, but as one of their own. Naliah smiled, faint but radiant. "Then you are truly ours," she said, "and we are yours. Whatever comes, we face it together." The chief raised his hand toward the horizon. Let it be known that Eli Boone walks among us, not as a stranger, not as a man divided, but as a bridge between worlds. His courage has saved lives. His heart will shape the days to come. Eli turned to the rising sun, warmth on his face, wind tugging at his coat, the river flowing steadily at his feet. For the first time in years, he felt unburdened, whole, and ready. The plains were vast, the future uncertain, but he no longer faced it alone. And as the golden light spilled across the valley, he stepped forward, knowing that he had found not just a home, but a purpose that would endure beyond the river, beyond the storms, beyond even time itself. In that golden morning, with the river at his feet and the tribe behind him, Eli Boone embraced a life forged by courage, sealed by honor, and destined to bridge two worlds forever.